Congratulations, you have just woken up in the 1870s, in the heart of the Wild West. The good news is that you are physically present in a legendary chapter of history, a time of expansion and myth-making. The bad news? Your chances of survival just dropped lower than you can possibly imagine. The first challenge hits you before your eyelids even flutter open. It isn't the light, but the smell. It's not the earthy, pleasant aroma of pine and sage you were hoping for. Instead, the air is thick, carrying a pungency that assaults your sensism mix of unwashed bodies, animal waste, and what might be raw sewage stagnating nearby. You see, bathing wasn't exactly a priority out here, nor was it a simple task. Most settlers considered a thorough scrub a luxury reserved for once a month, and that is being generous. Some folks went entire winters without letting water touch their skin in any significant way. Water was liquid gold, precious and heavy to haul, and using it to clean the grime off your neck seemed wastefully decadent when you needed it for drinking and cooking. You might need a moment to adjust to the realization that everyone around you, including yourself, carries a distinct, sharp odor. As you drag yourself from your bed, which is likely just a rough straw mattress that rustles with every move and is almost certainly crawling with bedbugs, you realize how every muscle in your body screams in protest. Life in the 1870s frontier involved constant, grinding physical labor from the moment the sun crested the horizon until it dipped below the earth. There were no weekends off, no vacations to look forward to, and certainly no ergonomic considerations for your aching back. Your body was a tool used until it broke. Whether you were a farmer, a miner, or a ranch hand, the work was backbreaking. It left even the strongest young men permanently hunched and arthritic by the time they hit their 30s. Imagine spending 14 hours plowing fields, hauling water in heavy wooden buckets, chopping timber, or working deep underground in a mine shaft where the air was thin and stale. It is no wonder the average lifespan was hovering around 35 years. You might think you work hard in your modern life, but this is a different beast entirely. Standing on the dusty floorboards, you notice the biting chill in the air. If it is winter, your cabin might be 20 degrees below freezing inside. If you had a fireplace, you likely let the fire die down to smoldering embers overnight to save precious fuel. Good luck finding a thermostat or thermal underwear in this century. The cold metal biting your skin as you reach for a tool or a latch wakes you up faster than any coffee could. And if it's summer, get ready to sweat through every single layer you own. Speaking of clothing, you can forget about comfort. Men typically owned maybe 2 sets of clothes, rough canvas or denim pants that stood up on their own, and cotton shirts that chafed against the skin. Women wore multiple layers, regardless of the temperature: chemises, corsets, petticoats, and long dresses that dragged in the dirt and mud. Everything was scratchy, ill-fitting, and rarely cleaned. Those fancy, tailored outfits you've seen in movies are pure fiction for the average person. You're wearing coarse wool and leather, stiff with age. Your stomach growls, a hollow, demanding sound that reminds you it is time for breakfast. I hope you like beans, biscuits, and coffee, because that is likely on the menu for every single meal. The Wild West diet was monotonous and nutritionally deficient. Fresh fruits and vegetables were seasonal luxuries that disappeared with the frost. Meat, when available, was often preserved with so much salt or smoke it was like chewing on leather, because refrigeration simply didn't exist. You'll pretend you didn't see the weevils in the flour. Scurvy, a disease caused by vitamin C deficiency, was surprisingly common among settlers. You know, that charming condition where your gums bleed and your teeth fall out. It was a constant threat despite being easily preventable with modern knowledge. You might think the coffee would at least be a saving grace. Cowboys always seem to have a pot brewing in the movies, right? But what you are served barely resembles what you recognize as coffee. It is typically boiled to death, bitter beyond belief, and might include crushed eggshells to settle the grounds. Still, the caffeine helps you face the day, so you drink it without complaint. The warm, sticky candle wax on the table offering a dim glow in the pre-dawn light. Before heading outside, you check your shoes. You learned quickly to shake out your boots each morning to dislodge scorpions or snakes that might have sought shelter in the leather during the night. One wrong move, and you could be facing a venomous bite miles from any medical help. Nothing to worry about, probably. Stepping outside your cabin, you are immediately aware of how exposed you are. The vast landscape of the American frontier was breathtaking, sure, with open fields stretching silently to the horizon, but it was also unforgiving. Extreme weather could appear with little warning. Blizzards, tornadoes, flash floods, or drought could all mean death for the unprepared. The sky might be clear now, with the sun low on the horizon, but that could change in minutes. Survival teaches lessons money can't buy, and the weather is a harsh tutor. If you have settled in a frontier town, you might think civilization offers some protection. In some ways, that is true. In others, it just presents different dangers. Towns in the Wild West were hotbeds of disease. Without proper sewage systems or any real understanding of germ theory, illnesses spread rapidly through these cramped communities. Cholera, typhoid, smallpox, diphtheria, and tuberculosis were constant threats. An outbreak could wipe out half a town in weeks, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Speaking of towns, let's say you decide to visit one today. As you approach, you notice there is a distinct lack of the organized layout you might expect. Many Western towns grew haphazardly, with buildings constructed wherever it was convenient, often without proper planning. The streets aren't paved. They are dirt tracks that transform into mud pits when it rains, and choking dust bowls when it dries. The smell hits you again, stronger here. Horse manure is everywhere. There are no street cleaners or sanitation departments to tidy up the mess. In some towns, the accumulated waste could be knee-deep in heavily trafficked areas, turning a simple walk across the street into a hazardous journey. Flies swarm around you in thick clouds, and you realize why disease spreads so easily here. As you walk down the main street, your worn shoes scuffing frost or mud, you pass the saloon. It is likely one of the busiest establishments in town, but don't expect glamour. Contrary to Hollywood depictions, saloons weren't sparkling palaces with swinging doors and talented piano players in the corner. Most were crude, one-room affairs with rough plank bars and basic furniture. The liquor served wasn't fine whiskey, aged in oak barrels, but raw alcohol often mixed with tobacco juice, pepper, turpentine, or even gunpowder to give it an extra kick. A single drink could blind you if you were unlucky. It was poison, plain and simple, sold to men desperate to numb the ache of their labor. The saloon represents another deadly aspect of frontier life: violence. These establishments were frequently sites of deadly confrontations, not because of formal duels or honorable showdowns, but because of drunken arguments that escalated quickly in a heavily armed society. The romanticized gunfights of Western movies were rare. Most violence was impulsive, messy, and over trivial matters like a card game or a perceived insult. You might want to keep your head down and your mouth shut. Speaking of being armed, you will notice almost everyone carries a weapon of some kind, but not for the reasons you might think. While personal protection was certainly a factor, weapons were primarily tools for hunting, protection from wildlife, and sometimes for signaling distress. The constant threat from bears, wolves, cougars, and venomous snakes made going unarmed foolish, especially when traveling between settlements. The cold weight of a firearm was a comfort, not a statement. You might be surprised to learn that many frontier towns actually had strict gun control laws. Places like Dodge City and Tombstone required visitors to surrender their firearms when entering town limits. The famous gunfight at the OK Corral actually started because a gang refused to comply with a weapons ordinance. Despite what you've seen in movies, quick-draw duels in the middle of the street were exceedingly rare. Most shootings were ambushes or happened during robberies. As you continue your walk, hearing the hollow thuds of boots on wood, you pass the local doctor's office. Medical care in the 1870s frontier would horrify you. Most doctors had little or no formal training. Surgical procedures were performed without anesthesia beyond whiskey or morphine, and sterilization was virtually unknown. Something as simple as an infected cut could lead to amputation or death. The doctor's tools were often just metal instruments wiped on a dirty apron. Common treatments included bloodletting, mercury compounds, arsenic, and other toxic substances that often did more harm than good. Women in childbirth faced mortality rates as high as 1 in 4 in remote areas. Dentistry involved extraction without anesthesia, using crude tools. Most people suffered from painful dental issues for years before finally losing their teeth. If you were injured or fell ill on the frontier, your survival often depended more on luck than medical intervention. The famous phrase, "Only the strong survive," had literal meaning in the Wild West. Your stomach growls again, reminding you it is time for lunch. You head to the local restaurant, which is likely just an extension of someone's home, where meals are served for a fee. The food isn't any more varied than your breakfast. Meat is tough and often spoiled, despite heavy smoking or salting. Vegetables, if available, are overcooked to mush. Food safety standards don't exist, so dysentery is just around the corner. While eating, surrounded by muffled chatter and the clinking of tin plates, you overhear conversations about recent attacks, outlaw gangs, or the danger of traveling alone. While Native American violence against settlers was less common than portrayed in popular culture, the frontier was still a place of conflict. The systematic displacement of indigenous peoples created tensions that sometimes erupted into violence. Settlers and the military were often the aggressors, but fear pervaded everything. As for outlaws, they were a genuine threat, particularly in remote areas. Law enforcement was sparse, with a single sheriff, sometimes responsible for thousands of square miles. In many places, justice was handled through vigilante action rather than formal legal proceedings. Lynch mobs were common, and the concept of innocent until proven guilty often didn't apply. If you were accused of horse theft, you might find yourself hanging from a tree before sunset. After lunch, you decide to visit the local general store to stock up on supplies. The prices shock you. Basic necessities cost far more on the frontier than back east due to the difficulty and expense of transportation. A simple can of peaches might cost a small fortune. Many settlers spent most of their income on essential supplies, with little left over for comfort or luxury. The store offers another glimpse into frontier reality, the crushing isolation. Mail delivery was infrequent and unreliable. Newspapers might be weeks or months out of date. Information traveled slowly, and you might go years without news from family back east. Many settlers never saw their relatives again after moving west. The psychological toll of this isolation contributed to high rates of depression, alcoholism, and suicide. You feel the heavy silence of the plains pressing in on you, a reminder of how far you are from everything you know. As the afternoon wears on, you notice dark clouds gathering on the horizon. Weather on the frontier wasn't just uncomfortable, it could be deadly. Without modern forecasting, storms arrived with little warning. Blizzards could strand travelers, leading to freezing deaths. Tornadoes destroyed entire communities with no emergency services to assist survivors. Flash floods washed away wagon trains in the blink of an eye. Catastrophe forces opportunity, or so they say, but mostly it just forces survival. If you were lucky enough to have a proper home, it provided minimal protection. Most frontier dwellings were hastily constructed from whatever materials were available: sod houses on the plains, log cabins in forested regions, or simple wooden structures in towns. None were particularly effective against extreme weather. Winter temperatures inside could drop below freezing, frosting the water in your cup. Summer heat was often unbearable, turning attics into ovens. As the storm approaches, with wind howling through the gaps in the buildings, you decide to head back to your cabin before it hits. On the way, you pass a group of men heading to work at the local mine. Mining was one of the deadliest professions on the frontier. Underground cave-ins, toxic gas exposure, explosions from improperly handled blasting powder, and machinery accidents claimed countless lives. Miners also suffered from long-term health issues like black lung. Even if you avoided mining, few frontier occupations were safe. Farming involved dangerous equipment with no safety features. Ranching meant working with unpredictable animals weighing hundreds of pounds. Logging had one of the highest fatality rates of any profession. Whatever you did to make a living, your risk of serious injury or death was exponentially higher than in the modern world. No one told you this would be easy, and they certainly didn't mention the constant peril. You make it back to your cabin just as the rain begins to fall. The roof leaks in several places, and you place buckets to catch the water, the hollow thuds of the drops echoing in the small space. This is a good opportunity to refill your drinking water. As clean water was scarce and precious, many frontier settlers drank from the same sources used for washing and watering livestock, leading to waterborne illnesses that could quickly turn fatal. As you sit in your leaky cabin, listening to the rain and the distant clanging of thunder, you reflect on how different reality is from the romanticized version of the Wild West. There were no heroes or villains, just people struggling to survive in incredibly harsh conditions. The fact that anyone made it through is a testament to human resilience. These moments linger longer than the years that follow, etched into your memory by the sheer struggle of existence. Night falls early as you have no electricity. Candles and oil lamps provide a dim glow, and you are careful with them. Fire was a constant danger in frontier homes. A single spark could mean losing everything, with no fire department to call for help. Many towns burned to the ground at least once in their history. You prepare for bed, exhausted from just one day. Your muscles ache, your stomach is unsettled, and your mind is overwhelmed by the constant vigilance. As you drift off to sleep, you wonder if you'll make it through tomorrow, or if you'll become just another statistic in the dangerous story of the American frontier. The wind whispers through the cracks in the walls, a haunting reminder of how small and vulnerable humans are against the vastness of the untamed wilderness. Tomorrow, if you're lucky enough to see it, will bring all these challenges again, along with new ones you haven't yet imagined. The morning light filters through the cracks in your cabin walls, dust's softened light waking you from a restless sleep. Your body aches from the hard mattress, but there is no time to linger. The Wild West waits for no one. As you rise, you remember yesterday's harsh introduction to frontier life and wonder what new challenges today will bring. Let's say you decide to leave town today to travel across the frontier. Whether you are heading to another settlement, joining a wagon train west, or simply exploring, travel in the 1870s was an entirely different experience than what you are used to. The good news is that the Transcontinental Railroad had been completed, connecting the coasts. The bad news, unless you were wealthy, you probably couldn't afford it. Most frontier folks traveled by horse, wagon, or simply on foot, their echoing footsteps marking the vast distance. If you owned a horse, consider yourself fortunate. Horses were expensive to buy and maintain, putting them out of reach for many settlers. A good horse might cost the equivalent of several months' wages. Then you needed saddles, bridles, feed, and veterinary care, though veterinary care often meant shooting the animal if it broke a leg. Riding itself was no pleasure cruise. Saddles weren't designed for comfort, but for function. Hours in the saddle left even experienced riders with blisters and aching muscles. And if your horse spooked at a snake or sudden noise, you could easily be thrown, potentially suffering broken bones, miles from any help. If you couldn't afford a horse, you might travel by wagon. Forget the romantic image of pioneers cheerfully rolling across pristine prairies. Wagon travel was brutally uncomfortable. The vehicles had no suspension beyond the slight give-in wooden wheels. You felt every rock, rut, and hole in the trail. The constant jarring caused wagon sickness, similar to seasickness, leaving travelers nauseous and miserable. Roads, if they existed at all, were typically just dirt tracks carved by previous travelers. After rain, they became muddy quagmires, where wagons could sink axle deep. During dry periods, the dust was so thick you could barely breathe or see. Wagons frequently broke down, leaving you stranded. Let's say you have decided to journey all the way to California or Oregon. You have joined a wagon train heading west on the famous Oregon Trail. This 2,000-mile journey was one of the most perilous undertakings of the 19th century. Of the vast numbers who attempted it, an estimated 1 in 10 didn't survive. The Oregon Trail was sometimes called the nation's longest graveyard. Some historians estimate that 10 to 15 people died for every mile. Think about that. A grave every few hundred feet for 2,000 miles. The trail was lined with makeshift crosses and stone markers, many without names, as families were forced to bury loved ones and continue their journey immediately. Disease was the #1 killer. Cholera, a bacterial infection spread through contaminated water, was particularly devastating. It caused severe dehydration so quickly that a person could be healthy at breakfast and dead by dinner. There was no effective treatment available. Wagon trains would sometimes lose dozens of people in a single cholera outbreak. Other diseases, like dysentery, typhoid, and mountain fever, claimed countless lives. Children were especially vulnerable, with many families losing multiple children during the journey. Medical care was rudimentary at best, often consisting of folk remedies that did little to help and sometimes made conditions worse. Crossing rivers presented another deadly challenge. Wagons weren't designed to float, but pioneers had to cross numerous rivers on their journey west. Some had ferries or fords, but many required the wagon to be floated across like a makeshift boat. Wagons frequently capsized, drowning people and livestock and destroying precious supplies. The rivers claimed hundreds of lives. You watch the water rush by, a quiet dread settling in your stomach. Contrary to popular belief, attacks by Native Americans were relatively rare on the trail. Most tribes were actually helpful to migrants, offering supplies and guidance. The majority of violent deaths came from accidents, being crushed by wagon wheels, drowning, or being kicked by draft animals. Firearms accidents were shockingly common, as most travelers were inexperienced with weapons, but carried them for protection. A sharp crack of a rifle often meant a tragedy, not a defense. The psychological toll of the journey was immense. Families buried children, parents, and spouses along the way, then had to continue traveling immediately. There was no time for extended grief. Each day's delay meant less chance of crossing the mountains before winter snows made passes impossible. The constant stress, grief, and physical hardship led many travelers to mental breakdown. Suicide was not uncommon among trail migrants. If you somehow survived the journey to California or Oregon, your challenges weren't over. Many arrived at their destination having spent all their money and resources on the journey itself. Families often arrived destitute, malnourished, and ill, only to find that the promised land had its own harsh realities. But let's say you have decided not to travel that far. Perhaps you are heading to a nearby town instead. Even short journeys presented significant dangers. Travelers might encounter outlaws who saw lone riders as easy targets. The natural environment posed constant threats. Flash floods could wash out trails. Summer heat in desert regions could kill through dehydration. Winter blizzards routinely trapped travelers, leading to freezing deaths. Navigation itself was challenging in an era before detailed maps. You relied on vague directions and landmarks that could change. Getting lost in the wilderness could be a death sentence. As you travel today, you notice another aspect of frontier life that movies rarely depict accurately: the stunning diversity of people. The Wild West wasn't populated solely by white cowboys. It was a meeting ground of cultures. Chinese immigrants worked as railroad builders and merchants. Mexican families had been living in the Southwest long before it became U.S. territory. Black cowboys made up as much as a quarter of the workforce on some ranches. European immigrants from Germany, Ireland, Italy, and Scandinavia brought their cultures. And of course, dozens of distinct Native American nations called these lands home. This diversity, however, didn't mean equality. Racial violence was a common feature of frontier life. Chinese workers faced brutal discrimination and were often forced to take the most dangerous jobs. Mexican landowners frequently saw their property seized through legal manipulation. Black Americans who moved west hoping to escape Southern discrimination often found frontier racism just as entrenched. For Native Americans, the expansion of white settlement was nothing short of catastrophic. The indigenous population had been decimated by disease, warfare, and forced relocation. The destruction of their food sources, particularly the buffalo, was a deliberate tactic. As you continue your journey, seeing the smoke rising from chimneys of a distant settlement, you ponder another group whose experience differed markedly from Hollywood depictions. Women on the frontier. Far from helpless damsels, frontier women performed incredibly demanding physical labor while navigating restrictive social expectations. They handled domestic duties, worked in fields, tended livestock, and defended the home. Their workday started before dawn and ended well after dark. A frontier woman might need to plow fields in the morning, deliver a neighbor's baby at midday, fight off predators in the afternoon, and still prepare meals. Many women became widows young due to the dangerous nature of frontier life and had to manage farms alone. Despite their essential contributions, women had few legal rights. They couldn't vote or own property independently in most places. Domestic violence was considered a private matter. Some women found economic independence through running boarding houses or working as nurses. Then there were the soiled doves, prostitutes, who worked in frontier brothels. The reality was grim abuse, addiction, and disease were common. However, some women did find greater freedom on the frontier than back east. The shortage of women gave them more marriage options, and some territories granted women voting rights early on. Ordinary people now dream bigger than before, and sometimes that dream is just simple autonomy. As the day wears on, you might wonder about law enforcement in this supposedly lawless land. The reality was complex. Major towns had some organized law, but vast rural areas had minimal official protection. County sheriffs were responsible for enormous territories, making regular patrols impossible. They relied on deputizing citizens during emergencies. Town marshals handled law within town limits, often dangerous and poorly paid positions. Some famous lawmen moved between legitimate law enforcement and questionable enterprises. Federal marshals focused on major crimes like mail robbery. In many remote areas, justice was handled through vigilante groups. Sometimes these groups maintained order, but they could easily become vehicles for mob violence. The iconic quick-draw gunfight was largely a myth. Most violence was mundane, impulsive, and alcohol-fueled. Bar fights and domestic disputes were far more common. Criminal punishment was harsh. Hanging was the standard penalty for murder and sometimes theft. Prisons were primitive facilities with high mortality rates. Many communities preferred immediate execution to the expense of imprisonment. As evening approaches, you decide to seek shelter. If you are lucky, you might find a town with a hotel. Don't expect luxury. A typical room would have a simple bed, a washstand, and minimal privacy. The walls were thin, allowing you to hear your neighbor's every movement. In busier establishments, you might even share a bed with a stranger. The sheets might not have been changed. A night's lodging was expensive for the average worker. Many chose to sleep in stables or under the stars. If you were traveling through remote areas, you would camp. This meant building a fire, preparing a meal, and sleeping on the ground. Proper fire management was a matter of life and death. A fire too large could spark a prairie fire. One too small might not prevent hypothermia. Campfire cooking required skills most modern people lack. As night falls, the sounds of the frontier darkness surround you. Coyotes howl, birds call, and the wind whispers. For those accustomed to modern noise, the profound darkness and silence could be terrifying. Many travelers slept poorly, fearful of unknown dangers. Native attacks were rare, but possible. Predators, like wolves and mountain lions, might investigate camps. Venomous snakes sought warmth. Even if no threats materialized, the psychological stress took its toll. Exhaustion was constant. You drift towards sleep, reflecting on the day's journey. Travel in the Wild West was grueling and dangerous. The skills required from navigation to firearms safety took years to develop. The darkness deepens, and the sounds of night creatures grow louder. Tomorrow will bring new challenges. If you survive the night, perhaps you'll reach your destination, or perhaps you'll become another unmarked grave. The Wild West forgave no weakness. Every day survived was a victory against overwhelming odds. The new day dawns, and you have somehow survived the night, a victory in itself. As you rub the sleep from your eyes, you contemplate what direction your experience might take. Today, perhaps you'll try your luck in a mining town. You've heard stories of gold and silver, of men becoming wealthy overnight. What these stories don't mention are the brutal realities awaiting those who chase mineral dreams. Let's say you decide to try mining. First, you need to stake a claim, which is increasingly difficult. Then the real work begins. Placer mining meant standing in ice-cold water for hours, sifting through sediment. Your hands would crack and bleed. Hard rock mining was even worse, tunneling into unstable rock, breathing toxic dust, and handling explosives. Cave-ins and explosions were frequent. Miners constantly inhaled rock dust, leading to silicosis. Mercury used in processing caused neurological damage. The industry had no safety regulations. Mine owners prioritized profit. Injuries were expected. Medical care was minimal. For all this risk, the reward was usually subsistence wages. Most miners worked for large companies, earning a few dollars a day. Storekeepers and saloon owners made more money than the miners. Mining towns were rough places. Young, single men, dangerous work, and alcohol created a volatile mix. Violence was commonplace. Sanitation was abysmal, with waste accumulating in streets. Disease spread rapidly. If you found gold, you faced the challenge of keeping it. Banks were primitive and often predatory. Robbery was a constant threat. Perhaps you decide to try ranching instead. The cattle industry was booming. Surely this would be better. Ranching avoided some mining hazards, but introduced others. Starting a ranch required significant capital. Many went into debt. Nature was a cruel partner. Droughts withered grazing lands. Harsh winters killed herds. Disease swept through livestock. Predators took a toll. The iconic cattle drives were grueling undertakings. Cowboys worked 20-hour days, moving thousands of animals. River crossings could turn deadly. Stampedes were a constant nightmare. The cowboy's life was far from the freedom portrayed in movies. They were poorly paid laborers, often young men with few options. Their diet was poor, and injuries were common. Perhaps farming appeals to you. The Homestead Act offered free land. It seemed like an incredible opportunity, but the reality was challenging. The land was often arid and difficult to farm. Building shelter was the first task, typically a sod house that leaked and harbored insects. Breaking the land for planting was backbreaking work. Once crops were planted, farmers faced drought, floods, frost, and grasshoppers. Disease was devastating for isolated families. Women worked the fields while pregnant. Farm accidents were common. The isolation took a psychological toll. Prairie madness was a real phenomenon. Economic obstacles remained, with railroads keeping crop prices low and transport costs high. By the 1870s, wage labor was emerging as an option. Working for railroads or in mills avoided some risks but introduced others. Industrial safety was non-existent. Machinery accidents were frequent. Railroad work was particularly dangerous. Pay was low and hours were long. Child labor was common. Workers had no legal protections and could be fired without cause. Company towns created a form of debt bondage. Whether you mined, ranched, farmed, or worked for wages, frontier life shaped your experience. The relationship with time was different, governed by daylight and seasons. Punctuality had limited relevance. Entertainment was simple: storytelling, music, reading. Holidays were important community events. As the day draws to a close, you reflect on the resilience required. The people who survived possessed extraordinary endurance. The darkness gathers, bringing a profound silence. You wonder if you would have what it took to survive here. The people who shaped the West were complex individuals facing extraordinary challenges. Their story is one of endurance. The cool night air settles, and the stars emerge in a brilliance impossible to see today. This is one pure beauty of the frontier. Morning arrives again, and with it comes hunger. Food in the 1870s was monotonous. Game was available, but required time and ammunition to hunt. Most families relied on staples like beans, corn, and pork. Fresh produce was seasonal. Nutritional deficiencies were common. Food preservation was critical. Meat was smoked or salted. Vegetables were pickled. Improper preservation led to spoilage. Pests were a constant problem. Cooking was labor-intensive. Water had to be hauled. Meals lacked variety. Spices were luxuries. Despite limitations, obesity was rare due to hard labor. However, malnutrition was common. Childhood on the frontier was different. Children worked from a young age, contributing to family survival. They weren't sheltered from harsh realities. Education was limited. Schools were primitive, with corporal punishment standard. Child mortality was high. Disease and accidents claimed many young lives. The psychological impact was immense. Parents expected to lose children. Health and medicine were primitive. Doctors were scarce and poorly trained. Home remedies were common, some harmful. Surgery was performed without anesthesia. Sterilization was unknown. Childbirth was incredibly dangerous. Maternal mortality was high. Life expectancy was low. Isolation was a defining feature of frontier life. Communication was slow. Loneliness was a constant struggle, especially for women. Social connections were limited by distance. Churches served as social hubs. Community institutions marked the transition to settled life. Mutual aid was essential. Barn raisings and harvest teams showed the necessity of cooperation. This interdependence existed alongside individualism. The tension between these values shaped frontier culture. As the day ends, you contemplate the mental resilience required. The darkness settles, bringing silence. You wonder about the people who chose this life, what drove them, what sustained them. Their story is a testament to human adaptability. Dawn breaks on your final day. You appreciate the raw beauty of the landscape, but the frontier mentality viewed nature as a resource to be exploited. Timber was cut, game hunted, and streams polluted. The destruction of the buffalo was a deliberate policy to break indigenous resistance. For Native Americans, white settlement was an apocalypse. The reservation system was a form of cultural genocide. Armed resistance usually ended in defeat. The tragedy was heightened by the loss of indigenous knowledge. Cultural conflicts extended to all groups. The West was diverse, but discrimination was rampant. Chinese immigrants faced exclusion. Mexican Americans lost land. Black Americans faced racism. European immigrants maintained distinct communities. The melting pot metaphor obscured these tensions. As the day progresses, you see a town undergoing transformation. The railroad brought rapid change. Corporate development replaced individual enterprise. Small operators were squeezed out. Corporate interests dominated politics. The transition was cultural as well. Towns became more organized. Institutions signaled permanence. Law enforcement became more professional. The legendary outlaws operated in this transitional period. Their mythology obscured reality. As evening approaches, you contemplate the gap between reality and myth. Why the fascination with the Wild West? The mythology emerged as the frontier disappeared. It offered reassuring narratives about American identity. It justified expansion, but it obscured the complex reality. The real West offered no simple moral lessons. As darkness falls, you reflect on your journey. You understand why you might not survive. The skills required are almost unimaginable today. Yet, the world continues to fascinate. Perhaps it's the raw honesty or the community interdependence. The legacy of the frontier extends to modern structures. The diversity contributed to modern America. The most accurate understanding holds multiple perspectives. As you drift to sleep, the sounds of the frontier surround you. Tomorrow, you'll return to your own time. You'll never view the West the same way. You'll appreciate modern comforts. You'll understand the real story lies in the daily struggles of ordinary people. Their legacy lives on. The real Wild West has disappeared, but echoes persist. The memory influences how Americans understand themselves. The challenges of adaptation and community remain relevant. The stars shine above, connecting you to the past. Sleep comes, bringing dreams of a harsh and magnificent West. Let's be honest, the silence out here is heavy enough to crush you. It presses against the rough-hewn logs of the cabin, stealing the air from the room. You lie there, listening to the settling of the timber, the groaning of wood that feels almost sentient in the quiet dread of the night. It's not just the absence of noise, it's the presence of vast, indifferent space. You are a speck on a map that hasn't been fully drawn yet, and that realization hits you harder than the cold. You stare up at the ceiling, watching the lantern gold shadows dance from the dying fire. The smoldering embers cast long, spindly shapes that look like reaching fingers. It's easy to let your mind wander to the stories you've heard, the ones about lost travelers, about fever dreams, about the madness that creeps in when the wind won't stop howling. The wind is always there, whispering secrets you don't want to hear, rattling the doorframe like an unwanted guest. You think about the water barrel in the corner. You need a drink, but the thought of moving, of putting your bare feet on the freezing earth floor, keeps you paralyzed. You can hear the rustling of rodents in the thatch above. They are your roommates, uninvited and unclean, but at least they are alive. In this isolation, even a rat offers a strange sort of companionship. That's not normal, is it? But then again, nothing about this life is normal. Morning mist curls across the fields outside, visible through the cracks in the wall as the sun begins its slow climb. The light is gray and unforgiving, revealing the dust motes dancing in the stagnant air. You get up, your joints popping like dry twigs. The cold is a physical weight pressing down on your shoulders. You reach for your boots, shaking them out, mechanically a habit born of fear. The day ahead stretches out like a sentence. There is wood to chop, water to haul, animals to tend. The routine is a lifeline, a way to keep the chaos at bay. Even in chaos, small routines keep you human. You wash your face with a damp rag, the water shockingly cold, stinging your skin. It wakes you up, sharp and sudden. You look in the polished metal that serves as a mirror. The face staring back is older than its years, etched with lines of worry and exhaustion. You step outside, and the smell of damp wood and fire hits you. Smoke is rising from chimneys in the distance, thin ribbons of gray against the blue. It's a sign that others are awake, that you aren't entirely alone. But they are miles away, distant specks in a vast landscape. You walk to the barn, the mud sucking at your boots with every step. The hollow thuds of your footsteps echo in the stillness. Inside the barn, the air is warmer, smelling of hay and animal musk. The livestock are restless, sensing your mood. You calm them with a low murmur, your hand resting on the coarse wool of a sheep's flank. This contact grounds you. These animals depend on you, and in a way, you depend on them, not just for food or wool, but for a sense of purpose. Catastrophe forces opportunity, they say. Well, this is your opportunity to keep something alive in a place that wants to kill it. Work begins. The axe handle is smooth from use, fitting into your calloused palm like an extension of your arm. The sharp crack of wood splitting echoes across the yard to satisfying sound, a declaration of existence. You are here, you are working, you are surviving. The physical exertion warms you, chasing away the morning chill. Sweat trickles down your back, mingling with the grime of yesterday. By midday, the sun is high and fierce. The open fields stretch silently, shimmering in the heat. You pause to wipe your brow, looking out at the horizon. It's beautiful in a terrifying way. The scale of it makes your struggles feel insignificant. But then you look at the patch of ground you've tilled, the fence you've built. It's small, but it's yours. Freedom is limited, but real here. You answer to no master but the seasons and your own hunger. Lunch is a hurried affair, hard biscuits and dried meat that tastes of salt and smoke. You eat standing up, eyes scanning the perimeter. You never truly relax. Vigilance is the price of admission. You spot a hawk circling high above, hunting. It reminds you that everything here is either predator or prey. You are trying very hard not to be the latter. Afternoon brings a shift in the weather. The wind picks up, whipping the grass into a frenzy. Dark clouds stack up in the west, bruising the sky. A storm is coming. You can feel the pressure drop, a physical sensation in your ears. You hurry to secure the animals, checking latches and tying down loose equipment. The air turns electric. The smell of ozone mixing with the dust. The first drops of rain are heavy and cold, hitting the dry earth with audible slaps. Then the sky opens up, rain sheets down, turning the yard into a quagmire in minutes. You retreat to the cabin, soaked to the bone. The roof leaks, of course. You place buckets under the drips, the rhythmic plink-plink becoming the soundtrack of the storm. You sit by the fire, shivering. The dampness seeps into everything: your clothes, your bedding, your bones. You wrap yourself in a blanket, staring into the flames. This is the reality they don't tell you about. The wet, the cold, the endless battle against the elements. You wonder if it's worth it. The promise of land, of a new life, is it worth this misery? But then, as the storm passes, a shaft of sunlight breaks through the clouds. It illuminates the wet stones outside, making them glisten like jewels. The air is scrubbed clean, smelling of wet earth and sage. A rainbow arcs across the sky, vibrant and impossible. You step outside, taking a deep breath. The beauty of it catches in your throat. For a moment, the hardship fades. These moments linger longer than the years that follow. The sheer, raw majesty of the land claims you. You realize that you are part of something elemental. You are not just surviving. You are witnessing the world in its rawest form. History isn't written in stone. It's written in footsteps like yours, in the mud and the dust. Evening comes softly, the sky turning a bruised purple. You light the lantern again, the warm glow pushing back the shadows. You prepare a simple dinner, the smell of cooking food filling the small space. It's not a gourmet meal, but it fills your belly. You eat slowly, savoring the warmth. As you prepare for bed, you check the door one last time. The heavy bar drops into place with a reassuring thud. You are safe, for now. You crawl into the straw mattress, pulling the scratchy wool blanket up to your chin. The wind has died down to a whisper. The silence returns, but it feels less threatening now. It feels like peace. You close your eyes, exhaustion pulling you under. Dreams come quickly, dreams of golden fields, of thriving new settlements, of a future you are building with your own two hands. The challenges will be there tomorrow. The cold, the mud, the danger, but so will you. And that, you realize, is enough. The next morning, you decide to head into town. You need supplies, and frankly, you need to see another human face. The journey is slow, the wagon wheels creaking and groaning over the uneven ground. You pass a neighbor on the road, a rare occurrence. You exchange a nod, a brief greeting. There's a shared understanding in that Luca recognition of the struggle you both endure. The town appears on the horizon, a cluster of wooden buildings huddled like sleepy animals against the vastness. Smoke rises from chimneys, blending with the dust. As you get closer, you hear the sounds of civilization, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the bark of a dog, the distant murmur of voices. It sounds like music after the silence of the farm. You pulled the wagon up to the general store, tying the horses to the rail. The boardwalk echoes under your boots as you step up. Inside, the store smells of coffee, spices, and leather. It's a sensory overload. You run your hand over a bolt of calico fabric, the texture smooth and cool. You look at the jars of candy, the bright colors vivid against the grainy wood of the shelves. The shopkeeper greets you by name. He asks about your crops, your health. You chat about the weather, about the rumors of a new railroad line. It's mundane conversation, but it feels profound. You are part of a community, however scattered. You buy your supplies flour, sugar, nails, maybe a small treat like a tin of peaches. Stepping back out into the sunlight, you feel a renewed sense of purpose. You see children playing in the street, chasing a hoop with sticks. You see a woman hanging laundry, the white sheets snapping in the wind. You see a group of men arguing good-naturedly outside the saloon. This is what you are building, not just a farm, but a society. Change sneaks in where no one notices. A new building here, a paved road there. Slowly, imperceptibly, the wild is being tamed. You are part of that taming. You are the edge of the knife, carving a future out of the wilderness. It's a heavy responsibility, but also a thrilling one. You load your wagon, securing the precious cargo. The horses are eager to head home. You climb up, taking the reins. The leather is warm in your hands. You look back at the town one last time. It's rough, dirty, and dangerous, but it's also alive. It's a testament to human stubbornness. The ride home is peaceful. The sun is setting, casting long shadows across the trail. The sky turns a brilliant orange, then fades to indigo. The first stars appear, faint pinpoints of light. You breathe in the cool air, smelling the sage and the cooling earth. You feel a deep, quiet satisfaction. You arrive back at your cabin as full dark settles in. You unhitch the horses, rubbing them down, murmuring thanks. You carry your supplies inside, placing them on the shelves. You are stocked up. You are ready for whatever comes next. You sit on the step of your cabin, watching the moon rise. It glints on the wet stones, turning the world silver. You think about the people back east, in their crowded cities, with their paved streets and gaslights. They think they know the world, but they don't know this. They don't know the feeling of being the only living thing for miles, of facing the raw power of nature and surviving. You are tough. You have to be, but you are also changed. The frontier has stripped away the excess, leaving only what is essential. You know who you are now. You know what you are capable of, and that knowledge is worth more than gold. The wind picks up again, whispering through the grass. It's a lonely sound, but you are no longer afraid of it. It's just the voice of the land, and you are learning to speak its language. You stand up, stretching your aching back. It's time to sleep. Tomorrow brings more work, more struggle, but it also brings another sunrise, another chance to build, to live. You blow out the lantern, plunging the room into darkness, but outside, the stars are burning with a fierce, cold light. They watch over you, silent witnesses to your journey. You close your eyes, and for the first time in a long time, you sleep without dreaming of fear. You dream of the future, and it looks like home. History is often told as a series of dates and battles, but the real story is in the spaces between. It's in the quiet moments of despair and the sudden bursts of joy. It's in the smell of rain on dry earth and the taste of bitter coffee. It's in the feel of rough wool and the sound of wind in the timber. It's in the lives of ordinary people doing extraordinary things just to stay alive. You are one of those people. Your name might not be in the history books, but your footprint is on the land. You are the foundation upon which a nation is being built. It's a messy, brutal, beautiful process, and you are right in the middle of it. So, sleep well, you've earned it. The Wild West is still wild, and it's still waiting for you. But tonight, the world is quiet. Tonight, you are safe. And in this place, at this time, that is the greatest victory of all. The embers in the fireplace pop, a sharp sound in the stillness. It's a reminder that the fire is still alive, just like you. And as the heavy silence settles once more, you realize something profound. You aren't just surviving the frontier. You are becoming part of it. The grit, the danger, the beauty, it's woven into your soul now. You couldn't go back to the soft life of the East, even if you wanted to. This is where you belong, in the dust, in the wind, in the wild. Welcome home. The shadows lengthen, stretching across the floorboards like reaching hands. The night is yours, and you, my friend, are acting with every breath you take. Sleep now, the dawn comes.